The cabin wasn't a refuge, it felt like a trap sprung by the mountains themselves. Perched precariously on a slope thick with ancient pines, Vasil's Rest leaned under the weight of decades and neglect. Elena had chosen it for the isolation, a desperate bid to escape the city's frantic pulse, and finish her doctoral thesis on Carpathian folklore. Now, surrounded by a silence so deep it hummed in her ears, isolation felt less like peace and more like a suffocating shroud. The locals in the village nestled in the valley below had been reserved. Their eyes, when they met hers, held a flicker of something unreadable. Pity? Warning? Old man Mihai, who'd rented her the key, had merely grunted, "Wood stove works. Water from the spring. Stay on the paths after dark." His gaze had lingered on the dense, shadowed woods pressing against the cabin's clearing. "The mountains," he'd added, his voice rough as bark. "They sleep deep, but they dream. Loud." The first night was uneventful, filled only with the symphony of the forest, the sighing pines, the distant cry of an owl, the rustle of unseen things in the undergrowth. Comforting, Elena told herself. Natural, yet sleep was elusive, her mind conjuring shapes in the deep shadows beyond the grimy cabin windows. On the second day, exploring the overgrown path behind the cabin, she found it. A crude circle of stones half buried in moss and pine needles, nestled in a small, unnaturally still clearing. In the center stood a weathered wooden post, its top carved into a shape that made Elena's skin prickle. Not quite a wolf, not quite a man, but something disturbingly in between. Its mouth open in a silent snarl. Whorls and angular symbols she didn't recognize were etched deep into the post's sides. The air within the circle felt colder, denser, as if charged with static. Mihai's words echoed, "They dream," loud. That night, the sounds changed. The wind, rising from the peaks, didn't whistle. It whispered. Fragments of words, guttural and ancient, seemed woven into its passage through the pines. Psalm, Tresit, foam, sleep, awake, hunger. Elena sat bolt upright in the narrow bed, heart hammering against her ribs. She strained her ears. Nothing. Just the wind. Wasn't it? She lit the oil lamp, its feeble glow pushing back the darkness only a few feet. The silence that followed the wind's retreat was worse. It wasn't empty silence. It was a held breath, a waiting. Then, a low vibration began. Not heard, but felt through the cabin floorboards, resonating deep in her bones. A rhythmic thrumming, like a colossal heartbeat buried beneath the mountain. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at her throat. She scrambled to the window, peering into the ink-black night. The clearing was empty, the forest a wall of impenetrable shadow. But the thrumming, it grew stronger, a subterranean drum calling to something primal within her. A pull towards the trees that felt both terrifying and irresistible. The following day dawned gray and oppressive. The sky, a lid of lead, pressing down on the valley. Elena tried to work, spreading her notes on the rickety table, but the symbols from the stone circle swam before her eyes. Mihai's warnings, the whispering wind, the subterranean pulse, it all coalesced into a chilling narrative far older than her academic text. The folklore she studied spoke of entities slumbering deep within the earth, guardians or demons, woken by hubris or forgotten rites. Awakening. The word now tasted like ashes. As dusk bled into night, the forest came alive. Not with animals, but with movement in the periphery. Shapes flitted between the trees at the edge of the clearing, too tall for deer, too fluid for bears, melting into the shadows before she could focus. Eyes, reflecting the feeble light from her window like chips of cold amber, watched from the darkness, unblinking, intelligent, hungry. The whispering wind returned, louder now, more insistent. Tresit, Vina, Harna, awake, come, food. The thrumming beneath the cabin intensified, vibrating the tin mug on the table. Elena backed into the corner farthest from the door and windows, clutching a rusted fire poker, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The oil lamp flickered wildly, casting leaping, monstrous shadows on the walls. A new sound cut through the wind and the thrum, a scraping, dragging noise from just outside the cabin wall, like claws on wood, slow, deliberate. Scrape, pause, scrape. It moved along the side of the building towards the front door. Bang! Something heavy slammed against the door. The old wood groaned in its frame. Elena screamed, the sound swallowed by the oppressive night. Bang! The door shuddered. Dust rained from the rafters. The thrumming reached a crescendo, shaking the entire structure. The whispering wind became a chorus, a cacophony of ancient voices chanting words that curdled her blood. The eyes in the forest multiplied, drawing closer, pinpricks of malevolent light. Crack! The top hinge of the door splintered. Through the gap, Elena glimpsed not wood but thick, dark fur, matted with pine needles and mud. And a smell hit her, wet earth, decaying leaves, and beneath it, something metallic and rotten, like old blood and spoiled meat. The stench of the deep earth disturbed. The door buckled inwards with a final, rending crash. The oil lamp guttered and died, plunging the cabin into near-total darkness. Only the dim, cold starlight from the broken doorway provided any illumination, silhouetting the massive shape filling it. It wasn't a bear. It stood hunched but impossibly tall, its shoulders brushing the doorframe. Its form was a grotesque amalgamation. Thick, powerful limbs ending in claws that scraped the floorboards. A torso corded with muscle beneath the filthy pelt, and a head. The head was elongated, lupine but disturbingly humanoid, dominated by a muzzle full of yellowed, dagger-like fangs. Its eyes burned with the same cold amber light as those in the forest, but infinitely older, infinitely more aware. They fixed on Elena, pinning her in place with a gaze that held the weight of centuries, and a hunger as deep as the mountain roots. This was no mere beast. This was something that belonged to the stone circle, to the whispering wind, to the thrumming heart of the mountain. Mihai's entity, the sleeper, awakened. It didn't roar. It issued a low, rumbling growl that vibrated in Elena's chest, a sound that spoke of unfathomable age and bottomless appetite. Saliva, thick and glistening, dripped from its jaws onto the splintered wood. The stench intensified, making her gag. The creature took a step forward, its massive claws gouging deep furrows in the floorboards. The eyes of its kin crowded the doorway and windows, a silent, watching horde. The mountain's pulse thundered in her ears, a drumbeat of doom. Elena raised the fire poker, her arm trembling violently. The absurdity of the gesture struck her like a physical blow. Against this? Against the awakened heart of the Carpathians? The creature tilted its monstrous head, a gesture almost curious. Then the corners of its fanged maw seemed to twist upwards. Not a smile. A predator acknowledging insignificant resistance. It took another step, the cabin groaning under its weight. The amber eyes narrowed, focusing solely on her. The whispering wind surged into the cabin, carrying the final, chilling word on a breath thick, with the smell of the crypt and the deep, dark earth. Hana. Food? The awakening was complete, and the mountains were hungry. The ancient pulse beneath her feet wasn't just a vibration anymore. It was a command. The creature lowered its head, a guttural clicking sound emanating from its throat. The eyes in the darkness outside flared brighter, moving closer, converging on the shattered doorway. The cabin was no longer a trap. It was a butcher's block. Elena's scream died before it reached her lips, choked by the primordial terror radiating from the being before her. Its claw, thick as her wrist and ending in a talon blackened like obsidian, lifted, not to strike, to point. At her. The silent command was absolute. The forest held its breath. The drumming stopped. In that sudden, suffocating silence, Elena knew the truth Mihai hadn't spoken. The sleeper hadn't just awakened. It had chosen its first meal. The Carpathians had opened their eyes, and they were ravenous. The fire poker clattered from her nerveless fingers, the sound impossibly loud in the void. The creature's growl deepened into something like satisfaction. It stepped fully into the cabin, the ancient wood screaming in protest. The darkness behind its burning eyes held the weight of forgotten epochs, and a hunger older than the mountains themselves. The awakening was over. The feast was about to begin.